So today we're going to be continuing to take a look at a scenario where civilization starts over. We are now on episode 30 of the series, and it is time for World War II. In the previous episode, we saw the beginning of the war and the event that led up to the war, which is going to be World War II, between the Square Alliance and the Triangle Alliance. So if you haven't seen the last episode, well, make sure to go watch it, because otherwise you're not going to really know how World War II was built up and started. And I'm not really going to do a recap of the last episode because nothing really happened other than the build up and the actual start of the war. So if you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. All the support is greatly appreciated. Make sure to leave some comments with your input. Can't really do suggestions because this was a pre-recorded video from about 3 weeks ago at this point. But yeah, let's go ahead and just jump straight into World War II. I hope you guys are ready. So at the end of the previous episode, Russia started its invasion of the Polish state, and we saw a large encirclement down south here, which had troops cut off from the rest of their country. They fled into the Farmers Union. However, the Farmers Union deported them down to the Old Empire as prisoners of war. Now, the Brown team forced the Triangle team to intercept these POWs and to bring them home back to the Polish country. However, this was kind of against what the Triangle team wanted to do, specifically the Greek country, who did not want to send troops into the Old Empire to capture POWs. But they were kind of forced to anyway, since the Brown team is a large supplier to the Triangle team. And when they went in there, they surrounded the troops that were exporting the POWs, and the Old Empire was notified, and they decided that that was an act of war. So the Old Empire declared war on the Triangle Alliance, and that of course brought in their allies, the Russians and the Norwegians. And now we have ourselves the beginning of World War II. So the invasion of Poland will continue. Russian troops are having little to no issues invading this country. It's a fairly new one. It just unionized in the last 2 episodes. So, I mean, they have a lot of population, but they're not exactly set up for this. And yeah, the Great Depression at this point is a thing of the past. So the world isn't really feeling the effects of that, but the Russians will completely annex and take out the blue country and meet the border of the Brown team, who, like the rest of the world, has been gearing up for this war just in case it goes a little crazy, and by the look of things, it might be a little crazy. Elsewhere though, back down where the action has all started, the Old Empire will invade into the Greek country and see a lot of resistance from the Greek country. They were very aware that them going into the Purple country would probably warrant a war, so they were ready and they reinforced their border, which kind of slows down the Old Empire just a little bit, but not enough, as they're able to take all these northern provinces up here, and that is going to be significant because the Farmers Union will be joining up with the Old Empire and the Russians in the Square Alliance. This opens up a whole new front in Europe, specifically over with this northern Yugoslav country, and what would you know? Russian troops and Old Empire troops are already in the Farmers Union and are prepared to tackle and go to war against this country. They were taken completely by surprise for this. Surveillance still isn't on par with it as today. Satellites aren't used at this point in time. But we're seeing our first couple of air warfare battles. We're seeing our first tank battles. We're seeing the modern era start to emerge in this war. The Square Alliance has far superior technology than the Triangle Alliance. Now, although the Triangle Alliance in numbers is a little bit stronger than the Square Alliance in total, the Old Empire and the Russians have been heavily investing in their technology, and it far outclasses that of the Triangle Alliance. Now, in terms of internally, the Triangle Alliance does have its own rankings, the strongest being the Dark Cyan team, followed by the Green team over here, then the Italian Union, the Purple country here, and then we have the Greeks, and then the Yugoslavs. So the Greeks are one of the weaker countries within the Triangle Alliance, and they are not even top 15 in the world, compared to the Old Empire, who is rightfully number 2. And now we see our first series of naval battles take place in the Mediterranean Sea, and the Old Empire once again outclasses the Triangle Alliance, completely demolishing the Greek country's navies, and has complete air superiority over the Greek peninsula. Now the other countries here are all sending out their navies to set up a Mediterranean blockade to stop any foreign supplies from flowing in to this country here. Now I'm not sure which foreign supplies they might be receiving, and in worst case scenario you just go around Africa. But most of the Old Empire's friends, I guess, or friendly nations, are over here in Asia. So really they're just stopping any advances from the Old Empire's navy. But they have a lot of success in Greece, and this country is forced to surrender. More so, they capitulate. But up north, the Farmers Union is successful in capturing the capital of the Yugoslav country, and it is here that we see an unlikely ally join in on this war. It's going to be the Purple team. And surprise, surprise, they're joining the Square Alliance. The Purple team is far past its prime. It's been bullied throughout its history, and of course this isn't the same Purple team that we started the series with, because that wouldn't make much sense now, would it? But their ancestors were bullied by the Italian Union. They were bullied, I think, by the red team as well. But now they see the perfect opportunity to reestablish themselves as a world power. They want to live up to the name of their ancestors who once conquered over half of the Mediterranean Sea, and they want to bring back the glory of the purple. And they decide to join who they think will be the winning side of this war, and that is none other than the Old Empire's alliance. Together, working with their new allies, they're able to take over the rest of the Greek country, and I completely forgot to change the color, whoops. And together they will work with the Farmers Union to take over the rest of the Yugoslav country. Now the purple team is not even in the top 20 of world powers, however their military is something to really mess with. Now power rankings, they aren't just military, they also include economy, population control, all that other stuff. The purple team's military ranks within the top 20, but overall they do not. Doesn't matter though, the Farmers Union, which isn't just the Farmers Union, it's also the Russians and the Old Empyreans. It's actually a really cool name, the Old Empyreans. But this is a mixture army, it's not just the Farmers Union, which is why they're having so much success against the other countries. But eventually they do meet a brick wall, and that is the rest of the Triangle Alliance, who has been slowly but surely preparing for this. And at this point, it's a little bit of a turning point in the war. Now with their superiority over the air and sea, the Triangle Alliance is seeing success and is even able to recapture the capital of their fallen ally. It ends there though, because now the reinforcements have arrived and the front line is now stalemated. But now we head over to Africa, where the Old Empire is going to have itself a little bit of a day. The European powers didn't really think to reinforce Africa too well, and this will be a major flaw in their whole plan. Now the plan of course is to defend against the Square Alliance and to achieve victory, but they didn't go as far as to reinforce Africa, and that's an issue because as you can see, a lot of Africa is under their colonial control. So the Old Empire will do something pretty smart here. They're gonna go ahead and focus in on all of the major cities of these guys. They also take over the coastal areas where any naval bases may be, and either take over them or simply blow up the whole hangar. Well, the Old Empire sees little to no resistance. Now, of course, the natives here, they will resist. But overall, they don't see much at all from the overlords. And this kind of, sparks a little bit of some thinking within these countries. And said thinking is that of a free Africa. We already know that colonialism is on the decline. A lot of the world is not in favor of such a thing, and those countries include the African Union. They also include any free nations that were once under the chains of colonialism but are now free, like these two South American countries, as well as this group of North American ones up here. And there's also some countries just spotted around the map who are really against colonialism. So basically what we have here is the land-hungry powers, the Square team, versus imperialist Europe. It's kind of hard to pick a side there. But back up to this front line, a big issue happens for the Triangle team. Square team troops break through the front line and encircle a large number of troops. Now, naval bombardments do happen from the Adriatic Sea, and they are kind of effective. However, they lose over 50,000 men in this encirclement, and this really hurts the front line as these troops are now pouring into the Italian country. One of their two capitals are captured, and now fear will be struck in through the Triangle team, who is worried that they're maybe not as strong as they think they are. But all is well for the Triangle team because the Brown team has just entered the war on the side of the Triangle team. The Dutch country is a long ally of the Triangle Alliance. They have even been in the Triangle Alliance like in World War I and other operations against countries, but now they firmly rejoin it in the name of preserving Western Europe. I said in the last episode that they were kind of like an overseer, overlooker, and protector of Western Europe. They are now living up to that. The strongest country in the world has entered the fight against the second and third strongest. A battle of the ages, as their tanks cruise through the Polish state. Their capital is recaptured by Dutch forces, and they continue to roll through this area, which has not yet been fully secured by the Soviets, the Russians. I mean, it feels more appropriate to say the Soviets, but no, they're the Russians, they're not communists. And we can see the immediate effect that the Brown team has in this war. Now, the Russians will be forced to withdraw some of their forces from the Balkan area in order to defend against this ever-expanding front line. And if you've seen my videos before, you know that this usually comes with a good counteroffensive by the defending team. And that's exactly what we see. The Triangle team will now start an offensive into Africa in hopes of pushing back the Old Empire, and this goes pretty well. The Old Empire wasn't really too good at reinforcing these areas and keeping the supply routes running, so they are able to retake some of the major cities within the colony of the Italian Union, but they do eventually meet the main force, which is guarding Egypt at least, and that will stop them in their tracks. They also continue to see loss to the Old Empire in the southern regions, where their influence is waning. Over in this dark purple country, the entire coastline is captured, and the Old Empire will send a special regiment in to completely take over this colony. and they're able to get a good chunk of it. So that would definitely hit you in the morale. That's not a good thing to happen, and you know, back home, this isn't a very popular thing. Of course, war support in these countries is never going to be high. In the old empire, it's pretty high, but that's just the nature of this country. You know, they're kind of weaponized and geared up for war, restoring the old glory. You know, people are into that kind of stuff. People really aren't into fighting wars that are super far away though, so of course support in these two countries will be pretty low. Doesn't matter though, they're in the war, so it's not going to have any major effect on this war. But the Russians aren't completely useless against the strongest foe in the world. They will have their victories, specifically in southern Poland, where they're able to beat back the brown team's armies pretty well. And this is really like the first time the brown team has ever known a major defeat. They've been on top for a while, and if they haven't been on top, they've been number 2 for a while, but they never really have scaled up against an enemy that is either on par with them or is strong enough to fight back. They've usually gone against weaker countries. So, you know, they do outclass the Russians' armies, but that doesn't mean that they're going to completely get away with this. You know, the Russians will have their victories, and they even meet up with the original border with the brown team, causing some dysfunction up north and leading to another Russian advance, which is successful. So the brown team will start to kind of shift their focus. They will abandon this Bulge area over here and start to reinvade into the Polish areas, taking back a majority of the Polish state, and then setting up a defensive front to stop the Russians from re-entering into their claimed land. They will now send their forces down south in hopes of kicking out the Farmers Union and other allies from the Balkan area. So they work on that. They're able to recapture the capital of the northern Yugoslav state and reach up to the border of the purple team. And at this point, this war is looking pretty evenly matched. Even up north with the Norwegians, there is no movement on either side, as the armies in these two areas are evenly matched. And to this point, the war will be stalemated for about 3 months. No major movement is made on either side, as each side starts to resupply and rejuvenate themselves to start a new counteroffensive elsewhere. The Triangle team is focused on just, you know, taking back this land and hopefully piecing out, whereas the Square team has other plans in mind. What are those other plans? Well, they have some more allies that they would like to add to this war, and that ally will be the white country over here in Iberia. These guys have long been enemies of the Triangle Alliance. However, up till recently, they have been pretty neutral with each other. You know, they haven't had any issues. They haven't really been mean. They've been pretty nice. But since this war is all about history and reclaiming land, they seem to want to get involved, and they want to reclaim Iberia for themselves. Now, this country is within the top 15, but they are no match for the Cyan or French country. So what their strategy is pretty simple. Send all of your units down towards the capital of the Dark Cyan team and cause as much chaos as possible. They do this, and they're able to encircle the capital, and this is pretty surprising for the Triangle team. Now, just because they encircled it doesn't mean they're going to be able to take it. But this holdout does occur for a few weeks, and it gives time for the next step in the Square team's plans. And that next step looks something like this. The African Union will join the war on the side of the old empire against the brown team and the Triangle Alliance. The African Union has longed for the end of colonialism, and although they don't necessarily agree with the way of the old empire and the Russians, they do see it as a way to stop the Europeans' colonialism across the world. And for the first time in many, many decades, maybe even centuries, the African Union will start its army up to go out and invade. Very quickly will the Triangle team make the decision to blitz against the white Iberian team, and this is in order to, of course, get them out of the way, because hey, a top 15 power in the world, top 11 actually, just joined the war. These guys didn't make the rankings in the last episode, but they're number 11 in both power and in technology. So it makes sense that these guys want to get rid of this country as soon as possible in order to prepare for this. This will lead to millions of casualties. And the brown team is especially surprised by this, and they feel a little hurt. They held pretty decent relations with the African Union. They often negotiated over democracy and other ideals that they share, but in this war, it just simply couldn't be, and now they are enemies. So as the white country in Iberia breathes its final breaths, that's kind of cringy, the Africans will make landfall in southern Iberia and move straight towards the capital of the Dark Cyan team. Now, this isn't necessarily their main goal. Their main goal is to focus on Africa and to relieve the old empire of any stress that they had with this country here. But their second objective is to, of course, do what they're doing now, to distract and to take down the Dark Cyan team. And since they are so close in proximity to their capital, and since this was a surprise attack, they are much more effective than this country was. They make multiple naval landings along their coast after achieving naval dominance in this region. They capture the islands of the Dark Purple team, and eventually are able to completely link up this coast, destroying the economy of the Dark Cyan country. Their armies will fall back in large, leaving a lot of this land over to the French country, who will continue the invasion and continue to beat up against this country. And they're able to stalemate the African Union for now. Their capital, though, is under siege. And now we jump over to this part of the Mediterranean where these two islands are captured by the African Union, and they then move into Sicily. And then they move from Sicily into the boot of Italy, and after achieving complete naval dominance of the southern Mediterranean, meet up with the forces of the old empire and start an invasion into Italy itself. Now, of course, both of these armies are mixing together under one, but I think it would look a lot cooler to have both colors. But these guys snake their way up into the Italian Union, and eventually their capital is underway. At this point, the Triangle Alliance is in trouble. The capitals of the Dark Cyan Team and the Italian Union, two of the strongest countries in the world, are under siege and are at risk of being captured. Although they are successful in taking out the White Country in Iberia, they are experiencing great loss in the Northern Balkans as the Italian Union's armies fall back. Additionally, the African Union is now starting its own campaign of northern Libya, and this one is crushing, as their armies are specialized in these areas. Eventually, the old empire will then send its own army out and meet up with that of the African Unions, completely disconnecting Europe from Northern Africa and extremely harming their control over their colonies. It's really not looking good for the Triangle Alliance. Who is on the fraud watch? To make things even worse for this alliance, the Norwegian country has just broken through the front lines against the Brown team, who is still mostly focusing in on their front line with the Russians, but also now focusing in on their front line with the Farmers Union. These guys are, experiencing a lot of difficulties. They have to maintain this front line, then they also have to maintain this front line, but at the same time, they need to supply troops to their allies in Iberia and Italy. Their naval forces are also dispersed, as well as their air force, so they are really just kind of not in a good position. It seems that this area of land in particular just isn't in the best of scenarios in history. World War I, World War II, Germany, you got smushed both times. It just isn't a good spot to fight a world war, I guess. In this timeline they were victorious, but that's beside the point. So the Triangle team is in need of desperate help. They're not looking great. The Brown team knows this, and the Brown team knows that eventually their allies will fall and it will just be them versus the squares, and that is not a favorable matchup for them at all. So they begin to look around the world at any country who might be seeking revenge against the old empire or even the Russians, and they are in luck because a couple of Central Asian countries aren't too happy and thrilled with how the result of the last World War broke out. These two countries, well, you can probably guess. The dark green country and the lime country, the previous #1 country in the world. These two countries team up once again to hopefully put an end to the old empire's ways and to completely dismantle this country. That's right, at this point the Triangle team has completely shifted their focus from just defending and, piecing out to eradicating the old empire once and for all. And that might be a little bit of an ambitious task, considering that they're fighting against some very large countries, including the Russians and the African Union. But the old empire has kind of had a way in both world wars, and getting rid of them would probably bring peace and prosperity to the Middle Eastern region once and for all. And at the same time, they could also line their pockets with the resources of this region, colonizing it just like how it was colonized in real life. And these two green countries seek land. Of course, the green country was once inhabited over here in Caucasia, and the lime country, of course, just wants revenge, but they both have their reasons for ending the old empire. So the war will start to climb towards its climax. We're not just there yet, though. The lime country will start to invade areas of the old empire, and they see a lot of success in these far out regions, of which the army is not fully defending. The lime team focuses in the south, and the green team in the north, where they once held. They have a lot of success, more so than you would think against the old empire, but this is because the old empire did not plan out for these two countries to join the war. They hadn't seen this escalating this much, and for the most part, they weren't expecting to go to war with the Triangle Alliance. They were prepared for it, but they didn't really see Greece invading them. That was kind of weird. But they used that opportunity to, of course, start World War II, and to hopefully, finish their quest of uniting the world under one country, or at least one ideology. So with their plans kind of, being soiled, they're going to have to re-evaluate themselves, maybe pull some troops from some other fronts, such as the one in Africa. And this will, of course, lead to a little bit of a pushback from the African forces of the colonial powers. They experience a lot of land loss over here in this Ethiopian area, as the whole thing is almost completely liberated by colonial forces. They're able to hold on in Egypt, though, as they value this land a lot more, and of course they have their own armies stationed here. And with the coming of this front over here, we once again see the Triangle Alliance start to push back in this Balkan area, and this offensive goes extremely well, as they're able to capture a large portion of the Adriatic coast. They're even able to push back a little bit against the old empire's armies in this area, and they're able to let their capital breathe a little bit better. Elsewhere, though, I have bad news for the Triangle sympathizers. The capital of the Dark Cyan team has just been captured, and one of the strongest countries in the world has lost that. And this is one of the strongest countries in the world, a large contributor to the Triangle Alliance. That's not what you want to see. And during that 3-month stalemate that happened over here in Europe, the colonial powers started to heavily tax their colonies, and the population of this colony is insane. It's a couple of tens of millions. Of course, down here, this one also has a couple million, and taxation on colonies throughout history. How did that go? Not very good. So now the Dark Scion Team's colonies are threatening to break away, specifically over here in Central and South America. They're of course pulling so many resources from here, they're probably pulling people too, while only giving back a higher amount of money that is needed from the taxpayers. And not just here, also in Africa, which is where we're going to be seeing a pretty bad event take place. The African Union's armies will simply walk through the Dark Scion Team's African colony. The settlers here welcome them with open arms, and for the most part, the entire colony will come under the control of the African Union. Similar things start to happen in the Italian Union's colony, as forces walk right through this area and meet little to no resistance. People who are here domestically welcome them, while the colonial armies here will fight back. But unfortunately, the colonial armies were mostly relying on the people living here, meaning that they're outnumbered severely. And after a few months, the entire African front line will be lost by the Triangle Team, and the Square countries will be victorious. The Dark Scion Team will now resort to conscription, a philosophy which is only used when countries are really in the drain. And guess what? They're really in the drain. With a couple million more soldiers now on their front line, they're able to easily push back against the African forces, of which have been dispersed amongst the continent. But they now hold a naval blockade, preventing the Dark Scion Team from expanding any further into the African continent. And we have a sea-based stalemate happening over here. Meanwhile though, the Italian Union is able to recapture Corsica for the French team, and they even move into Sardinia and split the island into two until eventually these two naval forces meet. I mean, the naval front lines look something like this up here, so you can kind of see how that portrays over to the land. With the old empire's continued issues over here with the two green countries, the front line over in Europe will continue to be pushed back, and the Triangle Team will see more and more success against the Farmers Union and the Purple Team. The Russian country is still occupied with this, so they're not really sending too many troops down into this area. Eventually, the Purple Team will fall over to Italian forces, and now the front line is in Greece. And this has the old empire a little bit worried. One, because why are they focusing on Greece and not their own country? And two, because they're being pushed back. They can't really rely on their allies too much right now because they're just simply being outnumbered. The Russians also start their early stages of conscription, which is not good. The Brown Team is nowhere near conscription. They're still using their forces. They haven't even gotten to the reserves just yet. The Russians are well through the reserves and are running out. So yes, they are victorious here, but for how long? Same thing with the Farmers Union. They have resorted to conscription, which is not good because that means they are running out of manpower. Old Empire is good though. They haven't touched their reserves just yet, so they have a long way to go before they have to start worrying about manpower. And their allies, on the other hand, though, they are worried about that. Not a good position to be in. So they're able to push back the Lime Team and the Green Team, but it is not within their interest to invade into these two countries. Instead, they will set up a front line, of which is going to be extremely hard to push past for the Lime and Green Team. It's going to be known as the Iron Wall, and it stops any offenses into the Purple Team's territory. But simply just leaving it at that would be kind of costly for the Purple Team. They would lose manpower, of course. Maintaining that wall would take a lot of resources. So they're going to look to add yet another ally to their alliance. And guess who? India. India, since gaining its independence, has made no true dedication to either side, being the Square or Triangle teams. They've been neutral. They've only had issues with the Lime Team, but other than that, they've just been chilling. But they are #1 trade partners with the old empire. And oh, how much easier that would be if they shared a land border, because the Lime Team blocks trade. They're kind of, a-holes. They're salty about the war, understandably. But the Indian team, like I just said, did have issues with them, so they will join this war on the side of the old empire. And at this point, it has become pretty clear that the world is tired of the Triangle Alliance. They're tired of the Brown Team and their democratic values, which they don't even really carry out. And although the Square Team might be scary and stupidly strong, they offer some countries a better future. Like, for example, this country over here. They offer the Farmers Union a better future. The Purple Team, the African Union, they align with their ideals. They align with the Indian team. Even the Norwegians, who want to push back against the Brown Team's influence. Really, when you look at it, simply, these guys are two big bads with a lot of ideals which are shared with a lot of the world. So they are gaining the popular vote amongst the world, and the Lime Team's capital falls for the second time in history. And the Indians will have a lot of success in pushing up against their old ally. And by that, I mean old self. With this very good development for the old empire, they will now send their troops back into the territory of the Lime team, and their objective is clear: take them out of the war as soon as possible. They will keep their defensive front against the green team, preventing them from going any further, but with the Indian team, they will try to get rid of the Lime team as soon as possible so they can focus on their European front line. Speaking of that European front line, they now start to push back up against the Italian Union, and together with the African Union, who has resent their forces to the Italian peninsula, will restart the invasion into the Italian Union. And here they capture their capital, a major development in this war, as the Italian Union has been causing a lot of trouble in the Balkans. With this, and like a lot of wars, the Italian Union will retreat a lot of their forces, leading to the brown team taking over responsibilities over here in order for the Italian Union to protect the motherland. With a lot less support on the front line, this will lead to a large pushback by the Square Alliance, and we see this mostly down here in Southern Europe, where the purple team was. Now, in order to get them back, I'd have to go back in time and redraw everything, so I can't do that. The purple team is still here, they're just the wrong color. So be mindful of that. Same thing with any advances by the Farmers Union. I have to go way back in the video and redraw it, so I really don't want to do that. And plus, you guys are pretty smart. You know which countries look like what and where they're supposed to be. So yeah, no bueno. And I should probably reiterate, since I know some people are going to be talking about it, the African Union did not take over all of Africa. It's just easier for me to color it all in under one color to kind of demonstrate better what exactly is going on down here, because if I just had like a bunch of spots, one, it would look horrible to look at, and two, it might be kind of confusing. So it's just easier to color them all under one, since, you know, they are technically sieging this area. I'm sure they're still fighting battles with various colonial forces here and there. Once again, just easier to overcolor it all. But yeah, it's not looking good for the triangle team now. Very not good, because now the Norwegians have kicked the brown team out of Sweden, and the brown team is now well through their reserves and is getting close to having to resort to conscription, much like the Russians and much like the Italians. The purple team and the Farmers Union, they were already there, but now it's getting kind of bad. They're running out of manpower. And it is here that we see our second large stalemate in the war, at least over in Europe. Forces become evenly matched as armies are exhausted and resupplying is needed. So now we'll shift our focus over here to Persia / the Middle East / Central Asia / South Asia. Really, what is this area called? But there definitely is not a stalemate here, as the armies of the old empire and the Indians see a lot of success in pushing against the Lime team, who has fallen oh so far from their peak. It's getting bad. This once strong empire is now crumbling and is cracking and is close to collapse completely, as the people within are now starting to understand better why the oligarchs rebelled and formed India. And the Lime team, after losing its government, will surrender, leaving the green team on its own, who, after being blitzed by the old empire, will also surrender over to the Square Alliance. And this thing is not looking ideal anymore, and this war is looking close to being over. While being the favorites in the beginning, the Triangle team has now suffered a huge loss. They no longer have the distraction that was once the Lime team and the green team, and are forced to defend Europe on their own without any help from the outside. They beg other countries on the outside, including Korea, China, Vietnam, and anyone who's willing to help, to start a new frontline against the Imperians, but they're just unsuccessful. No one seems to want to come to the help of the Triangle team. Neutral countries in Europe like Brittany, the Swiss one right here, and the Orange team, they don't care. They don't even respond. Why die fighting them now when they'll eventually annex you later? When they do annex you, they can do it peacefully. You know, there's no point in fighting. You don't stand a chance against these guys. So why fight? The Triangle team is on its own. And unfortunately, they're up against some of the strongest countries in the world, while their own versions of the strongest have been exposed for, well, not really being that strong. The brown team has now resorted completely to conscription, which allows them to expand a little bit into the square countries. They have a lot of success in Russia, who is running very quickly out of manpower, and they are on the border of the capital of the Farmers Union. That is until the wave of Imperium and Indian troops hit Europe, and millions of troops reinforce their allies against the brown team, who is being pushed all the way back to their border way over here in Poland. African troops will continue the march upwards into Italy, now going towards their second capital, which had previously been captured. And the icing on the cake, the Chinese country will side with the Square Alliance in the name of ending imperialism. This completely shocks the world. It even shocks their own alliance, which consists of the red team and the orange team. And why, you might be asking? Well, the Chinese country themselves are imperial. They have colonies in the Philippines, New Guinea, and Australia. So why is it that they joined forces with the Square team? Put it simply, although being hypocritic, They want to end colonialism. They are willing to give up their colonies as long as they, trade with them at a discounted rate. If it means kicking out the European scum from their side of the world, they want them out of Australia and they want them as far away from this side of the hemisphere as possible. It's like 3 in the morning. I'm sorry. I really want to record this video a lot better. I can't be as energetic as I usually am because I have to be kind of quiet, but I want to record this video tonight because all these ideas are flowing into my brain and I don't want to lose them when I go to sleep. So here we are. But it's all going to plan. I'm just not, presenting it as well as I wanted to. Also, hello me in 4 weeks. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're enjoying college. Probably not. Hopefully so though. So with the Chinese team's entrance into the war, it's over. They already had troops stationed down here waiting to go, and luckily for them, the people living here who have been taxed and used by the European powers are just all for this. First it goes the Dark Sign team's colony, and next up is the Brown team's, who is a little bit more able to fight back now, invading the Outback. I don't know about all that, but just for simplicity's sake, we're just gonna, kind of color it in because I like colors. They will eventually reach the coastal areas where the last of the Brown team's forces are waiting. The Imperials will flee, and Australia is liberated by the Chinese. New Zealand also starts to see invasion, although it's probably not too necessary, and China will now start to send forces elsewhere to reinforce the Square team in Europe. Over in South America, the Dark Sign team will experience a load of rebels. Tons of different rebel groups will sprout out against their imperializers, and they will successfully kick their forces out of their continent, and who knows, maybe these guys are helping them out. They most definitely are. These forces will then unite under one army to march northward up into North America, and this is known as the March of the Colonized in history books. This army, which, while not outclassing the Imperial forces here, simply outnumbers them and is able to drive them back. Eventually, uprisings happen in Cuba and Dominica as well. Sorry, Hispaniola. And these ideas spread out throughout all of North America, and this is the largest colonial rebellion in history. It spreads throughout the world, even reaching over to the Brown team's colonies in Africa. Canada isn't safe either, and the only colonizer to not be affected is the Irish country. But now refocusing in on Europe, a rejuvenated Square team is now pushing back fully against the Dutch. In the Balkans, there was no hope for any victory, and eventually the Italian Union completely falls over to Square Team forces. A campaign then starts into these other countries, starting to completely wipe them out. And on the border of the Brown Team, foreign troops for the first time in very many centuries are now entering into this country. The Russians break through the front line, and the Brown Team is in danger. The Norwegians take Copenhagen, a very large naval and aerial port for the Dutch, and the African Union is able to recapture the capital of the Dark Cyan team. From here, African and Imperial forces meet up in the Dark Purple team, which leads to both countries surrendering, leaving only the Dutch and the French on the side of the Triangle team. The French are targeted first, losing their capital and eventually surrendering as well, and we're left with the Square team versus the strongest. The Germans will completely militarize their population, making an elegant pushback against the Square team. They will even annex their vassal to use it as a staging ground for an invasion into the Balkans, and they will push back against the Russians as much as they can. But after the government decided to militarize their entire population and put children on the front line, the population all of a sudden isn't too fond of such an event. And the armies start to rebel against them, and very quickly the Brown team starts to see major defeat. As the old empire and the Russians storm through their country, the Norwegians have a lot of success in taking over the Danish and northern German areas. And eventually, the Battle of Amsterdam takes place, with Imperial troops capturing the city, executing the leader of the Brown team, and taking over the rest of that country. It is then made known that the other leaders of the Triangle team had fled to England. Imperial troops land here, and they no longer exist. Those leaders. And with that, minus some colonial areas across the world, the Triangle team has been defeated. In the strongest country in the world, only a couple of decades after the fall of the previous strongest country in the world, has seen complete defeat and has been dethroned. The old empire is victorious, and the Imperians have won this war. In the name of anti-colonialism and the re-establishment of their land, the Square team has won this war, and World War II is officially over. So now we can take a look at a peace treaty that will be drafted up amongst the members. So here is one final look at the pre-war map. Take it in because this thing is about to look a lot different. A lot different. So here we go. And I think I got everything. This is the longest amount of time I've ever spent on a peace treaty. So I will be doing my best to break it down, and I more than likely missed something. So I do apologize if I did, but man, look at this world map. And now you might be wondering, why is there white and light gray where the colonies used to be? Well, that's because the colonizers simply just abandoned the colonies. You know, in the peace treaty, they agreed to give independence to them, and that's exactly what they did. They never organized them, they didn't, you know, set them up, they just left. More simply, I didn't want to spend an extra 30 minutes dividing these things up, and plus that gives us something to do in the next episode. But starting over here in Europe, because, you know, elsewhere, it's pretty simple. The colonies were all given independence. In Africa, in Americas, and Oceania, every single one is given independence. The only colony that really remains is that of the Chinese countries, and then that of the Iberian country over here, because they won. Everything else, bye-bye, independent. Oh, and then the Irish country still has their colonies because they were neutral. Anyway, starting in Europe, Western Europe looks completely different and has the most divided up it's been in probably like 20 episodes. So we'll start in Iberia. The African Union, of course, was victorious in this region, and so was, I mean, technically not, but the white country was as well, and they get a majority of northern Iberia to themselves and split it with the African Union, who gets the remainder. Now, the African Union has claimed the coastal area of this country. The dark sign country doesn't exist anymore, by the way, but they claim that southern coast, and then they have a puppet state, which is outlined in their main color and colored in a lighter color. That's how you can tell what puppet states are. There are a few about. Generally, they are a lighter color. However, the exception is over here with Russia. It just didn't look good to have so much gray on the map, so I didn't do that. But generally, I will have them a lighter color, like as depicted here. But they get a puppet state over here, and then moving over here to France, we see that the dark purple team is on the verge of not existing, and the French team is also not in a good spot. A new country in the south of the brown team is released, and the Italian Union is split up between its two original countries. Over in Brittany, nothing changes here except for the release of this country. You guys remember this thing from about 20 episodes ago? Yeah, the brown team annexed it, but it's back now. The brown team's English claims are released and made into a country. Now heading over to Central Europe, Norway takes all of the brown team's claims in Sweden and Denmark. And then as for Germany, it is divided into two, well, technically one. We have the northern German state, which is a puppet of the Russian country, and then a southern Austrian/German state, which is also a puppet of the Russian country. This thing was once the vassal of the brown team, but it has been forced to switch sides, and the brown team does still exist. Of course, they are mostly fine. They have all of their valuable land over here, but they are missing, of course, their access to the Mediterranean, which had a lot of population, and most importantly, this area, which was very important to them. But all hope is not completely lost for the brown team, because a lot of their valuable stuff is still under their own control. They just got their ass kicked in this war pretty bad. Now the Russian country is huge. They now span all the way across into some German territory. They annexed that Polish state completely. The Farmers Union is now stretching across all the way over here. And guess what? The purple team is back. They have annexed all of the northern Baltic country and a lot of land from the Italian Union. Sardinia and these three islands here have gone over to the African Union. And now we peek over at the monster that is the old empire. These guys are huge now. I mean, they were already huge before, but they're even bigger now. They took land from the Italian Union. They took over all of Greece. They took over some land in Africa, although not too much because they didn't really want to make the African Union mad. Understandably so, they just kind of gained them as an ally. But where they took the most land was over here in Persia, as a majority of the Lime team went over to them and their puppet state and made them spit out a new country, which is this yellowish thing right here. The new countries are not affiliated with the square team. They don't have, governments of them. And for the most part, none of these countries have new governments other than the puppet states. The governments were left alone by the square team. But back over here, the Indian country annexed the rest of the Lime team. And I believe that is it. Oh, the African Union, they also took a little bit of land. You can see where they expanded down here a lot. Maybe a little bit hypocritical, but they might also want to help in the rebuilding effort. They might also organize these colonies into their own separate states. But I think that's it. I already talked about all the colonies being released. We'll completely decolonize the world in the next episode. I just simply, it's 3 in the morning and But yeah, this is my 4th civilization video today, I think. 4th? Yeah, 4th. So I'm getting kind of burnt out from this. But the square team is victorious in this war. And of course, all of their gained allies leave. The India, the African Union, China, they all leave because they're no longer part of the coalition. But it does go back to the original 3, which is Norway, Russia, and the old empire. The triangle team also does still exist. Just only these 2 states here. Nothing much. The Italian Union would still be in it if it was a union. However, they were forced apart, so that doesn't really happen. And yeah, I think I got everything. I really hope I did. I hope I didn't miss anything. And if I did, be sure to, well, I guess tell me in the comments, but I'm going to keep pre-recording videos after this, so the likelihood of that doing anything is very low. But I want to thank you guys so much for watching this extremely long episode. For me, It is an hour and 40 minutes long, which is one of my longest recordings as of the most recent years. So yeah, make sure to show some support. This series is going down a very different path now. I'm sure most of you didn't really envision the square team to win this, since the triangle team, you know, they have the brown team. They were the strongest alliance in history, mostly because they were the only alliance in history, but they had the momentum with them. But the old empire did win. And I do want to, say real quick that I have a lot of this stuff planned out. Some of this stuff, like this, for example, or not maybe this exactly, but the return of the old empire has been something that I've planned out for 15 episodes now. And I know some people are going to say that it's like, oh, they have plot armor and blah, 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 blah. But really, it's just kind of like they're the main character, I guess. I don't necessarily think of them having plot armor, but the world essentially revolves around this area. So it's kind of important to have some interesting stuff always happening there. I don't want to just completely abandon it, because then it kind of feels like the series loses its, I guess, weight. But for everyone crying plot armor, just stop. Maybe one day in the future. I'm not gonna talk about the future of that area of the series, because that's boring. I don't want to come out and say, oh, they're gonna collapse, or I don't want to come out and say that they're gonna be here forever and just deal with it. There's always gonna be a strong country there. I don't want to come out and just say that, because that would ruin the future. I like to throw surprises at you guys, and I think this episode was one of those surprises. I think having the quote-unquote good guys lose is something that needed to happen, and in World War I, the good guys won. Everyone's favorite countries is the red team, the brown team. Those guys are usually your favorites. They won. And the lime team, who isn't really a favorite, but they definitely had a lot more negative views than some of the other countries, they lost. But now the bad guys win, so I hope no one really has too much of an issue with that. I'm really liking the direction this series is going, and I'm really happy that it's been able to maintain its popularity throughout the 30 episodes that it has been through so far. So I want to thank you guys very much for that support, and I want to also tell you guys to hang around, because it's going to get a lot more interesting soon. We're going to be abandoning any, I guess, similarities to our current timeline. This already is pretty much doing that with a World War II Axis victory. Although I really don't think there were any good guys in this war. I think it was just two bad factions, and the one with more popularity won. But in the next episode, we're going to have a lot of, I was about to say hundreds, but tens of new countries in these new continents. Africa is going to look completely different. We have Oceania having many new countries. It's just going to be crazy. So this is like a turning point. We're turning the page on this series, and we're opening it up kind of like an alternate future scenario. Because at this point, we're in like the late 1940s, early 1950s. The timelines are kind of realigning. For a little bit there, this timeline was ahead of our current timeline based off of mirror events, which are events that happened in both timelines. But now after this war, which lasted a lot longer than World War II, they have kind of caught back up with each other. So like I said, we're kind of like in the late 1940s, 1950s now, but that doesn't matter too much, because like I said, we're going to be, abandoning our current timeline. Now there's still, I think, one more event that I want to happen in real life. If you're still listening, it's the nuclear bomb. We're going to get that thing rolling. But I don't think I'm really going to use it, because it's just, nukes are not fun. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for your support on this series. In the next episode, we will get this thing divided up, and we will have a very colorful map. So if you're excited for that, show some support. Leave a comment, leave a like, and I'll see you guys in the next video. And of course, thank you to all our super fans. This includes Georgie Badev, Deathstrider X, Arentine, HammerToad45, Connor the Gamer, Poland Country Ball, Nevada Garbage Trucks, and DW Cool Dude. Once again, thank you guys.